A while ago, I noticed Gunpla started using super glue instead of plastic cement to bond some of his pieces together, and I wondered if it was worth it. Well, in today's video, I'm happy to share what I've learned from trying it out for myself so you guys can benefit from this speed hack when it comes to removing seam lines. Let's get it. First, let's talk about the kit that we're going to be using today. The kit I'm going to be using is Bandai's Figurized Silhouette Mercury kit from Gundam Witch from Mercury series. Bandai has dedicated quality time into improving these kits to make for an absolutely enjoyable product for both painters and snap builders. The seam between pieces of the kit are intentionally placed to mimic seams within the clothing and ultimately makes for a much more appealing final product even as a snap build. The absence of color correcting stickers mean that your kit is 100% color separated, making paint planning a breeze. If you haven't built any of Bandai's Figurized line, I highly recommend these Gundam Witch from Mercury kits as they're a phenomenal build and a great jumping off point and moving into the non-mecha figures. Now onto the focus of today, which is going to be super glue. If you're unfamiliar of the difference between super glue and plastic cement, I'll give you guys a quick rundown right now. Super glue or cyanoacrylics are fast-acting adhesives that react to the moisture in the environment in order to solidify the bond between your two pieces. Plastic cement is a little bit different in that instead of adding an adhesive layer, the acetone solution that is used dissolves the plastic in order to get them to meld together into one solid piece. If you're following along in today's video, be sure that you have cyanoacrylics, CA glue, or super glue and not plastic cement. And if you do have plastic cement, I'll go ahead and link my tutorial on plastic cement up in the corner for you now. Alright, so we're ready to begin the gluing process. We have our two pieces here that we're going to be gluing together. Now, for today's video, I'm going to be using the Madworks black glue here. There are clear options, but I'm using the black so you guys can see it a little bit better on video. And when it comes to application, there are two ways you can go about this, and I'll show you them both right now. So first way is you can just go directly on the piece. Lightly squeeze it out, run it along the seam there. Along the seam there, just like that. And then I'll go ahead and just sandwich the pieces together. When I squeeze it together, you can see a little bit of that glue seeping out. And this isn't going to be enough to make sure that the surface is going to be flush when we sand it. So we're going to go ahead and just put a little bit over the top just like that. And then we'll go ahead and do the same thing to this side here. I'll try to be a little bit more mindful of how much glue I put down, but still comes out really fast. Now, you can use it this way for larger pieces here. And what you do is you'll go ahead and set this off to the side to let it dry. If you're in a hurry and you want to kind of move on quickly, you can get yourself something like accelerator. You go ahead and just spray this on and it'll set the glue a little bit quicker. Something to keep in mind if you really need to manage your time and move on quickly. I'm going to go ahead and put this down and we'll go ahead and get our next piece ready. All right, so the other method that we can use is going to be an application style. So what that means is we're going to take our super glue and we're going to put it in any sort of disposable container like this spoon, and we're going to use some sort of tool like this skewer to apply it to our piece. And so the second piece that we're going to work on is going to be this leg section from the kit, and I'll go ahead and focus it here. If you look at it, you can see there's a little bit of a seam line running down the outside of the leg. Same thing on the inside here. It's important that we use something like this to get a more precise application because as you can see when we pull the leg apart, there are some important components here that allow it for motion, such as this part here, which is going to be for the hip. So the application method is going to be really good because we can use a tool like this and apply it very precisely to the location that we have, because if you look closely, the clearance on this piece is really tight. So let's go ahead and get our super glue on there. So once again, just apply it nice and slowly. Come back here, dip some more, and just run it along the seam line as best as you can. If you go a little bit on the outside, not as big of a problem, because just like how we did on the first piece, we're going to add a little bit on the outside layer to make sure that when we sand it down that it stays flush and doesn't recess in. Clip it so I can see what I'm doing better. So now you guys can also see it better too. But I'll go ahead, touch off this side again one more time. Good thing about this Madworks super glue is that it doesn't dry immediately, so you have some time to actually apply it this way before it starts to kick in and really solidify. So perfect for doing these seam line removals, especially if you're painting. Once we have the piece all glued up, we'll go ahead and take our other half, and just like the first time, we'll go ahead, smush it down together, try to squeeze some of that out of the seam there, and then we'll go ahead and apply some glue directly over the top. So I'll go ahead, just run my skewer with some extra glue over the top, just like that. And be sure when you're going through your piece, you also make sure you catch all the possible edges that you could see here, but you make sure you get like to the areas down here on the bottom uncovered. So again, when you sand, you don't get any of those weird half seams kind of peeking through your primer. So I'll go ahead and put this off to the side to let it dry. There you guys have it, the 2 methods on how you can apply super glue to your pieces. One last thing before you go. Once you're done with the super glue, you can't put this back inside of the container. Reason being, as the moisture starts to enter this glue, it's going to start to activate it. And if we put any of this back inside of our bottle, we can cause our bottle to start to solidify. So once the glue comes out of the bottle, don't ever put it back in. Now, sometimes you're going to come across some complex parts like this, where I know this black section is supposed to sit here. And when we pulled the white section apart, these are the seams that we're going to remove. The black piece slides in. You can see I want to remove this seam line here, but I don't want to leave this black section here because I want to paint that separately so I can make sure that the color separation stays nice. So one of the good things about super glue kits like this is I can go ahead and make modifications to these sorts of pegs so I can attach the black parts later so that I can still paint the white parts white and paint the black parts black and remove the seam lines without ruining the black piece or having to try to mask it and ruining the mask job. How do we go about doing that? Well, it's simple really. We're just going to go ahead and cut out the lower sections of this peg here as well as this peg here. All right, so now you can see I got both sections cut out here. Oh, let's focus here. So I can see I got both sections cut out here, the bottom two here, there, and then this one right here. So what this allows me to do is I can push these two pieces together, and then when I'm done sealing the gap up and then painting it up and I'm done, all I gotta do is just snap the piece in just like that. Again, just as easy. If I need to get it apart, all I gotta do is just snap it out like that, and that makes it easy for me to get this piece in and out once the seam line is sealed up. All right, so now that the pieces are dry, let's go ahead and get to cleaning up our excess glue. Before we get started, I also want to check to make sure that our piece is moving okay. So all you got to do is just take our application skewer here, and as you can see, that hip joint there is moving nicely. So I know that I didn't get any glue in there. If you did, sometimes you might be able to break the glue, but just kind of be careful. If you get glue in that joint, it gets a little bit stiff, you might just kind of have to accept that that's going to be how it is. If it happens, it's okay. Little mistake, we can always roll with it. Onto the actual sanding of it, what I like to start is I like to start with a low grit, somewhere around 400. If you have a 400 grit sandpaper or sanding sponge, you can go ahead and start there. If you are doing a rounded part like this, where it's not like a flat geometric shape, like a hard angle, you can go ahead and use a soft sanding block like this. I'll go ahead and do a couple passes with the 400 just to kind of get it started. And I don't want to go too much because this 400 grit can be really strong. So once I do that, I'll jump up to the 600 grit, which isn't as strong, but still has quite a bit of bite to it. And this is to kind of just help, again, just take off any of that excess there on the piece. Now, once that's done, we can go ahead and jump up to our 1000 grit. This one, you can be a little bit more liberal with your sanding because at this point, we're just kind of smoothing out all of the previous work that we did. You can stop here or you can continue to go up to the 2500 like I'm doing here. Again, getting much more liberal. But this is the part that I really want to emphasize. Once you get to that 2500, I want you to jump up to the bouncer white. Reason being is that when you get to this step and you start to sand it, what you're going to start to do is really polish out that layer of super glue and really kind of bring that shine up on the rest of the plastic. And the reason you also want to do this too is because then you can really check before your primer goes down how good that sanding work is. So I'll bring it over here to the camera so you can see, and what I'll do is I'll turn it slightly, and what you'll see is that as I pass the reflection of my light over that piece, you can see just how smooth it really is. So you can do this to kind of get an idea for how smooth your parts are, give you an idea to make sure that you sanded that piece back down flush with the rest of it. At this point, now what I'll do is I'll go back in with my 1000 and rough it up just a little bit so that our primer has something to kind of really grip onto. If it's really polished like that, like you're going for a mirror candy or like a chrome piece, you can leave it at that polished state. But because I kind of want the flat white and I want to make sure that this piece gets the paint and it doesn't gonna rub off at any point because this moves, especially this section here. I wanna make sure that it's got a little bit of bite. So go back in with the 1000. We'll do the same thing on the outside, but this time I'm just gonna go ahead and start straight with the 600. If you're a little heavy-handed on your sanding, like I used to be, starting with 600 or even 800 grit will be better because you won't take off too much per pass. Now, as you can kind of see, I'm going slow and I'm just constantly stopping to check. Reason being is because I don't want to over sand, especially some of like these wrinkle details. I don't want to over sand that on this kit. So I'll take my time and I'll go slowly, do a couple passes, check, make sure I get all the edges in this bottom section here too. Come in with my 1000 just to kind of polish and clean it all up. And then again, you can jump up to the 2500, or at this point, if you want, you can also just go straight to the balancer white. The real test is going to be our primer. So we want to make sure we get it as smooth as possible before we get to that point, so we don't have to keep coming back and resanding and reapplying glue and resanding and reapplying glue. So get to this point where it's nice and polished, then come in with your 1000 just to give it a little bit of a rough grit to grab onto, rough it up a little bit, and then now your paint or your piece is ready for your primer layer. All right, so onto the moment of truth. I'm here in my spray paint booth. I've got my primer ready to go and my airbrush for this piece. I'm gonna go ahead and mask up and we'll go ahead and lay our primer down to see how well we did in covering up that seam line. All right, so let's take a look at the piece here. Let me get it to focus again. As you can see, that was where our seam line initially was, and it is basically gone. A little bit of an issue up there in the folds, but I think ultimately once painted white, it's not going to be super visible. When we flip it around to the inside, we can see there's a little bit of an issue with the upper lip there because that's where I didn't get as much super glue up at the top. But that's okay because this is going to be on the inside of the leg. It's not going to be nearly as visible as the outside section. So if I were to compare it to here like that, you know, it looks so much better now that the seam is gone. Flip it around there. See that? Yep. So let's go ahead, put this off to the side to let it dry. We'll go ahead and paint this piece up as well as the rest of them to see how well we did in removing those seam lines. Couple things before we wrap up today. One, not all super glues are going to be created equal. If you find that your super glue is drying up too quickly for you to be able to use this technique effectively, check out your local hobby stores for some slower drying super glues. Or if you would like to find the same Madworks one that I use in this video, I'll see if I can find a link for you guys and put them in the description below. But unfortunately, as of right now, at the time of recording, I don't have a link for you guys just yet. Second, if you're using isopropyl alcohol to strip some paint off of your pieces that have super glue on it, double check the bonds between your two pieces, as alcohol can weaken or even completely remove super glue if you're not careful. If you're doing it in quick succession, it won't be too bad, but I ultimately recommend sanding your pieces instead of ultimately soaking to strip them altogether. Finally, don't forget to tune in next time where I finish painting up the rest of Suletta Mercury, which includes her skin as well as what I do for her hair, so you guys don't want to miss that. With that said, guys, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you found some value in this video, and remember, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and I'll see you in the next one.